My name is Stephanie Soto. I'm the Assistant Director of Testing and Academic Success in the Tutoring and Testing Center. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Ethan, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Ethan DePry. I'm a junior, I'm a bio major, and I just took the MCAT this January. So, everything's still pretty fresh. So I'll be able to help you guys out.
Great. Rushi, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I apologize if my voice is a little scratchy today just because I am a little sick. But hi guys, I'm Rushi. I'm a junior and I just also took the MCAT in January. So like Ethan said, everything's a little fresh in my mind. I am planning to retake the MCAT just because I think I could do better. And now that I have a score, it's going to be a little less stressful going in. So I hope I can help you guys as best I can today.
Thank you. Julie, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie, and I took the MCAT in May of 2021. So it's been a little bit, but hopefully I can add a little bit more insight into how the MCAT kind of fits into the application process.
Annie is also on our panel. Annie, if you can introduce yourself.
I'm Annie, 21 years old. I'm a finance major here at Nova, but I'm also pre-med in the dual DO program. Originally from Dallas, Texas. And I'm a tutor with the TTC.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. To kind of kick off the panel, the first question is kind of, what is the MCAT? What's the material covered on this exam?
I can answer that. The MCAT has 4 sections, right? There's the chem physics section, the car section, the biochem section, and then the psych-soc section. But each section is not necessarily confined to only those things. So that's what I think makes the MCAT exam very hard and very unique. And also really you need to know more than what those sections say. So for example, for chem and physics, you need to know chem and physics, but also in that section, you'll see biochem. And especially for the biochem section, there's a lot of biology electives that will be included, like genetics, microbiology, and a lot of physiology as well.
Yeah, so some of the classes I think that are covered on the MCAT, which are some of the DO prereqs anyway, are like what Ethan said, Bio 1, Bio 2, Chem 1, Chem 2, OChem, and physics. And then I think some of the electives that people might consider taking for the MCAT would be anatomy 1 and 2, mostly anatomy 2 for the physiology, but intro to psych and sociology I think are helpful for the psych-soc session. And then there's a little bit of microbiome and embryology, but it's not a lot, so you could get away with just self-studying that.
Also adding on to what Ethan said before, not each section is confined, like chemistry and physics, that section not just confined to chemistry and physics. That being said, because there's so much content to be covered, you won't see every piece of content being covered in that section. For example, for physics, there might be something more heavily weighted or more commonly seen, like for example, electrostatics. That's something that's like most likely to be seen on test day, but it's not necessary. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will 100% see that on test day.
Yeah, I think as you study, you'll see more, they call it high yield and low yield topics. So there's such a broad range of topics among all those different courses, but some of them are a lot more likely to be on your exam. So for physics, I would actually say you're pretty much guaranteed to have either lens, electricity, or hydrodynamics on there. So really, and those are the 3 main, if you're gonna focus on physics, those are the 3 main things to focus on. Every other physics subject is very, very low yield.
All right, so question, how long did you study before you actually attempted the exam?
I can start off. I think it really varies from person to person, but for me, it was 6 months typically, like from what I saw on YouTube and from when I talked to other pre-med students, the typical amount of time is like 3 months. So I was originally scheduled, I started studying over the summer, and I was originally scheduled to take it in August, but I didn't think I was ready. So I did reschedule to January. So it does vary from person to person and depending on how you feel, if you're ready or not. But I think one thing that I did was to see if I was ready was taking a practice test like on a specific day. Um, and I told myself I would get this if I got this score, I'd be ready to take it. And I don't think I met that standard for myself. So I did take an extra 3 months to study.
Something I think that some people kind of forget about is that even with the MCAT, you might get caught as a deer in the headlights. I think this kind of applies more for COVID, which I don't know if it's going to be a problem anymore, but I took it in May 2021. I was originally supposed to take it in January, but then COVID happened, and I think someone got sick at the testing center before they were able to get vaccinated. So like my entire test date got canceled, and that happened to me twice. So I ended up taking it in May. So something that I like to tell people who ask me is to try and take it early, just in case something does happen out of your control, so that maybe you get nervous, or maybe your test date gets canceled, or maybe the computers aren't working. Then it gives you extra time to maybe study a little bit more and take it again, because I know for dual admit, I think the requirement is to have everything done by the end of August.
All right. For that study period, how long should you take doing the actual content learning versus practice tests?
First, you got to think about the purpose of the MCAT exam. So really the big overall reason that you're supposed to take this really difficult exam to get into medical school is so that they can test that you actually learn something in your classes. Because they look at your GPA, but then they also look at your MCAT score. And like, let's be real, like you can get an A in a class without actually having learned that material. So with the MCAT, you really need to like kind of think about yourself, like, all right, which classes did I actually learn something? Which classes did I not learn so much? And that's how you can determine for yourself how long you need to spend reviewing material, because it can really vary for a lot of people. If you retain information well, for example, you don't need to spend that much time, and you shouldn't like waste too much time on that, because you can really get burnt out if you spend too much time working on that. So for me personally, I didn't spend more than a couple weeks so much like reviewing all the material. I had to learn a lot of the bioelective stuff, but in terms of all my classes, and I just taken biochem too, so I retained that information really well. And then I really just went hard on the practice exams. Like I took one almost every other day, and along with all the different test banks and the practice questions, I just made myself really, really comfortable like reading those passages and answering those questions within the allotted time period. And I think that's what helped me a lot, like do really well.
Also, going off of what Ethan said, there is a kind of a distinction between content and being able to read the passage. Reading the passage may like be convoluted, and like things might not make sense at first when you're in your first like go through of the passage. So like knowing content is a lot different than being able to kind of answer the questions that MCAT is asking you. It's more of like application of that content in the context of the passage. So for me, I took about I think like a month and a half to cover content. And then from there, I kind of went through the Q packs and practice tests to be able to get myself more comfortable with answering the questions that MCAT is most likely to ask.
Yeah, to add on to what Rushi said, I would also agree that it's mostly like test taking ability. Like, yes, obviously content is important. Like, you're not going to be able to do well without knowing your content. But like, for example, like I took an MCAT prep course with Princeton, and like they would always tell us like your content is about 25% of the exam, and then how to take the test is about 75% of the exam, because it's a lot of just like because like the test will like ask you to apply what you know to like a completely brand new scenario or like something that's just like in a slightly new context that you just haven't seen before. So a lot of it is just, are you able to take something that you know, apply to something that you completely have never seen before, and like still answer questions based off it? So I would say that it's a lot more like test taking strategy and learning like how the MCAT likes to trick you and how the MCAT is formatted and things like that. Like it really is more so like knowing how to take that specific exam than the content itself.
I totally agree with everyone. Something else I want to add is that this exam is in like 6 to 8 hours, and that's not something people are used to taking. So another reason to start doing those practice tests as soon as you're comfortable is to build that test taking stamina. Something I did in the beginning was take like half length exams because I had access to those. And then once I went through all of those near the beginning, I started taking full length exams probably like at least once a week. And then the month before I actually took it, I started doing them pretty much every single day. And building up that test taking stamina is super important because if you don't prepare for that, you're going to be super tired by this psycho section. You're probably not going to do as well as you think you would if you were just chilling at home.
All right, so what study materials did you use? Did you use a prep company? If so, which one?
So personally, I did not take any course. What I used, I bought all the Princeton books, and it was a bad decision because I really only used the biology book. So I wasted money. I wouldn't do it again, but the main thing is that, or the other thing that I bought was UWorld, which I did use. I used for practice. So yeah, I had books for content review, UWorld for practice, and then the biggest help was obviously the AMC official practice material, because that stuff is the best, and everyone who takes the MCAT should get through all of that. But I'd say that's the only big requirement. Again, you need to know what's best for you, because if you can self-study, then I wouldn't spend all that money on a course. But if you feel like you need that organization, then the course could definitely be worth it.
Yeah.
Sorry. You can go
Sorry.
first. You can go
Go
first.
ahead, Julie. Okay, I'll go. Yeah, going off what Ethan said, sometimes people with the MCAT think that, oh, because this is such a big test, I have to have a test prep course, but that's not the case. Test prep courses can be expensive. Sometimes it is beneficial for people to use test prep courses just because like it's guided, it's very guided, and it's easier to like schedule your schedule when you're going to cover content and like how you're going to cover it. But for me, I bought the Kaplan test prep books, and it wasn't a course. It was just books to cover the content, and I did use all of them except the behavioral sciences book and the cars book. But I found going through that was very beneficial. But like I said, test prep courses like Blueprint or Princeton, not very necessary. But if it is something that you think is better for you, then I would definitely recommend it. But once again, it's very expensive, and it's not necessary unless it varies from person to person, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, to kind of throw my 2 cents in there, I personally took a Princeton course, and like yes, it is like expensive. So like it's definitely not necessary if you like can't spare the expense. But I would also say that it is like kind of worth the money because like I took it over I took the Princeton course over the summer. So I did it like it was every day from like 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. So it was like 3 hours of your day where you were doing both like content review and like practice passages. But it was also like you had homework before and you had like homework after. So it was pretty much like you were just like full-time like MCAT grind. So it really just depends on like your schedule, how you can fit it in and stuff like that. But I would just say that it's like a great resource just because you have a bunch of professors who are very like encouraging, other students who are also kind of like in the same boat, and your professors are like very much trying to help you understand like how the exam works. I guess again they go over content obviously, but they kind of expect you more so to do that content review on your own, but it is like a lot of like test taking strategy and stuff like that that they teach you. That's like every other company is probably going to teach it to you like a little bit differently, but I think like having like those tips in the back of your mind on test day is just like a little bit more like comforting. It's like, okay, like, well, I learned how to do it this way. Like, even though I'm a little bit confused, like you can still kind of rely on what you know or what you've been taught. So I think it was useful.
My experience is actually a little bit different from everyone's. I used a company called Altius, but I actually didn't pay for it. What happened is that they did a trial at Nova, and then I just got in contact with the person who's like recruiting from Nova. And so I got a free trial for like 2 weeks. I went to their website, downloaded all this stuff. And then after the 2 weeks expired, I just didn't renew it. And I had all this stuff there. So I worked through it that way. And then another thing for cars is Jack Weston. I think some of you guys have probably heard of it. Jack Weston has like daily cars passages, which I think is super important because with cars, it's not something that STEM majors are usually used to. So doing daily practice is incredibly useful and a really good way to get in a lot of studying without taking out a huge chunk of your day to just practice cars.
Oh, something I also want to add about like my experience like with cars, I think especially being like STEM minded as like many of us are, I think one of the most useful things I got out of the Princeton course was just their strategy for how they tell you to approach cars and like all the little like tips and tricks they tell you for like everything. Like they tell you how to approach the passage, they tell you how to approach like reading the question, and they teach you how to approach like reading the question versus like the answer choices and like process of elimination, like in their own very unique way. Like it's all very like standardized and like systematic. Like it just makes a lot of sense to my brain. It just kind of like steps. So like once you kind of like hack like the pattern that they teach you and like apply it to like all the passages, it becomes like a lot easier. So honestly, I think like Princeton is really worth it, especially for cars.
Yeah, and something I wanted to add to what Julie said about Jack Weston is that it is very useful, but it is extremely difficult. The level of difficulty for those questions is definitely, I'd say, higher than what the actual test is. So you might get yourself a little bit discouraged, but the best way to practice cars is honestly to read difficult material. And you'll find that on Jack Weston, but you'll also find that elsewhere. So the way that I always kind of approach cars is that like, it's reading comprehension, right? That's what it is. So all you need to do is just practice your reading ability. And even, it's hard to explain, but even when I'm not necessarily practicing for the MCAT, when I'm not practicing questions, I'll read like news articles. You know, you can read anything and you can apply that to your skills. You know what I mean? You're like just throughout the whole time where you're preparing for the MCAT, everything you do can contribute to that skill of reading comprehension. A big thing also is that for the science passages that you need to read in order to answer those questions, those can be quite difficult for people as well, especially biology. So a thing I'd recommend is finding research articles, because if you read research articles and you get comfortable reading those, then you'll be very comfortable reading the excerpts and the passages that they have in the bio and chem sections.
And one follow-up question we got from an audience member: what resources are best for self-study, especially if you haven't taken the class for that subject?
There's like a 300-page like Reddit document. I'm sure everyone's heard about it, but like 300-page like psych-soc document that's on Reddit. Like I know a lot of people, if you're like, maybe if you're like a bio or chem, or like if you're a science major, like maybe you haven't taken psych or soc like in an actual class, or maybe if you did, you didn't pay attention, like for whatever reason. Like there's a 300-page like document on Reddit for just all of the material that you could possibly need to know for the psych-soc section. So yeah, I would definitely recommend using that if you haven't taken either of those classes.
Yeah, and there's actually a condensed 70-page version of that document. And that's basically all I used for psych-soc review, because the real tests, right, you can practice reading articles for that, but really the content that you need to know is just all in that 70-page document.
And then also like another resource is YouTube. YouTube is like very good in covering content. Because like I didn't take anatomy and physiology, and a lot of the physiology stuff I didn't know. So I watched a lot of AK lecture videos, and those were very helpful in making me understand the content for the bio.
Something else I wanted to add is Khan Academy. I think everyone's familiar with that, and I'm so glad that the MCAT stuff is still free because there was a point in time where Khan Academy was saying that they might have to make it monetized because like they couldn't afford to keep it free.
All right, what study strategies would you recommend for the MCAT exam?
I think something I did that was super useful for me personally is everyone familiar with Anki? It's kind of like Quizlet, but I honestly think it's better. I made a just giant Anki deck of all of the concepts across like the entire exam that I just, when I was self-studying, realized that I am not good at. I cannot remember this, or I just do not understand it very well. And I did that Anki deck every single day. And honestly, it doesn't really take that long. I think towards the end, it only took me about like 10 minutes to go through it, as long as I actively thought about the card and actually like worked my way through the answer. Because the danger with Anki is that you can kind of look at it, be like, oh, I remember the answer, and then go next, like click to the next one. But for, I think for Anki to be useful, you need to kind of have that self-discipline to really like rethink about the question, make sure you understand the logic or like the concept, and then move on to the next card. But that daily practice and that daily review is an extremely good way to get in, like I said before, a lot of practice without taking out a huge chunk of your day.
Yeah, and there are other Anki decks that are on Reddit and online that you can download if you don't want to make your own. But I would actually, if you have the time, I would recommend making your own, because that kind of, it's more personalized to what you need to know. The most popular Anki deck is, I think, Miles Down on Reddit, and that one's just huge. Like, it's massive. It's got way more material than I think you really realistically would have to know. Like, if you knew everything on that deck, you'd probably get a 520 or above, but it would take forever to go through. So I would recommend really just making your own, personalizing it, like Julie said, and then that way it'll be personalized to you and it'll help you more than like anyone else.
I would also say, like, logistically, set yourself a routine and stick to it. And for me, like, that would change, like, depending on where I was. Like, I started studying for the MCAT when I was at home over the summer, and then, like, partially when I was like here at Nova, like for like a month and a half before I actually took my exam. So my routine looked different, like when I was in different places, like summer break where I didn't have anything going on versus like when I had school. But just like know what looks realistic and what looks achievable for you. So like if you have to work around your school schedule or your work schedule or like clubs, whatever, like just like figure out when you have the free time and like commit to it every day. Like don't make excuses, like just like find a way to do it. But definitely also like keep your health as like a priority. Like I feel like a lot of people like self-sabotage when the MCAT comes around and they don't sleep, they don't eat, they don't work out, they don't drink water. Like definitely take care of your health, like first and foremost, because like you're gonna burn out really quickly if you don't. So first and foremost, do that, and then set a schedule and don't waver from it, and just like commit to it every day. So like whether you're doing content review that day, whether you're taking a test that day, like set yourself a schedule like a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance, and just don't make excuses.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Annie because um like when I started studying for the MCAT, like I told myself like, or I set like a schedule for myself like each day, like Annie said, you need a routine going into them or going into starting to study. Because like Annie said, you're definitely going to burn out. You need to make sure that you hold yourself accountable to studying, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're staying healthy at the same time.
I think along the same vein is that when you are taking your practice exams, try to do it in test taking conditions. So for example, if you know your testing center wants you to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you know you're going to take it at 7:30 in the morning, start your test at 7:30 in the morning, because it kind of goes back to test taking endurance. Maybe you can take the test for 6 to 8 hours if you start at like 1 p.m., but the test doesn't start at 1 p.m. So different factors. Maybe you're sleepy in the morning. That could also affect your performance.
And for everyone here is a student at Nova, so I know the tutoring and testing center offers like students ability to take the if they are taking an MCAT, they can take it in the tutoring and testing center.
We had one question from an attendee. How do I manage studying for schoolwork and tests now, like biochem, while practicing for the MCAT? So how did you balance being a student and studying for this MCAT exam?
To study for biochem, because you're studying for the MCAT when you study for biochem, and it's such a big part of the test. Like I said, the MCAT's testing what you learn throughout all your school year. So really, you shouldn't be letting your classes take that much of a back seat to the MCAT. The MCAT's the most important thing in your life until you take it. But the main thing is that you should be still focusing on your classes, still trying to do well. And you should trust that as you're doing that, it'll help you improve your score. And really, there's ways to think about it. If you think like, okay, everything I do right now is going to help me improve my score. Everything I read, every assignment that I do, everything I learn, it should help me, contribute to the content review and my skills for the MCAT exam.
From a time management perspective, I would also say that like just kind of figure out what times of day like you can manage to do schoolwork versus MCAT versus like everything else you have going on. So like I would honestly really highly recommend like waking up early in the morning, like when you have like MCAT on top of other stuff going on, just because you can get more out of your day. So like wake up early, and whether you like do MCAT first or school stuff first, like just budget time for like everything you need to do. So like I'll do like class and then like work out and then like do MCAT and then do the rest of my homework, eat whatever, like go to bed, like figure out like what time of day you're going to do school, what time of day you're going to do MCAT. And I highly recommend like waking up early to be able to fit all of that in your day.
Something else that I kind of learned the hard way is learning to say no. The first semester that I was studying for the MCAT, I was taking like a full course load, doing research, doing stuff for work, blah, blah, blah. And I very quickly learned that it's pretty much impossible. Like, I don't think it's possible for anyone to manage all of that sort of stuff. So then the second semester I was studying for the MCAT, I really lightened up on some things, and that really did make it a lot more manageable. So I think coming to terms with the fact that there are so many things that you want to do, but since MCAT's your priority right now, other things are going to have to take some sort of a backseat, really does make the whole process a lot easier too.
Yeah, and from my experience, professors and like staff at Nova are very understanding of the pre-med students taking the MCAT. So like for example, like you have ongoing research with a professor, but you don't think you can do research at the same time as studying for the MCAT, because both are a very large time commitment. Some professors are very understanding. So talk to your professor if there's not enough time for you to commit to research or any other clubs or some anything like that. Just communicate with whoever you can to make sure that you have that time available to study for the MCAT.